Well, thank you, Zaya Lewis, Steer, everything y'all are doing to make this happen. To the supportive partners we have here with us, Tanine, Asia, shout y'all out. I'm sure for both of us, having you all in this space is like so critical for us. I mean, him much more practice and experience than me. For me, this is big, and so I'm really, really glad to have you here, Asia, of course, and Love here at the backdrop of all this.
This is a family affair.
Absolutely.
We're here at Steer, we're here in Olneyville.
Yes.
It feels good to be home.
Yes, and Steer, a great, I can't even call them a company, but, great group of people. Carlos Toro really stood out as just like a man of his word and a man of, a standard. And so with him, I, really just watched and learned, like, elevating just your own presentation and the quality of what you put out, that's your legacy.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And to do this, I felt that it had to involve people who understand that and who similarly have branded themselves and moved with an understanding of, like, if it's not quality, I don't want to do it. Like our kind of conversation when we met this past summer, right?
Yeah, late summer, I think.
Late summer, and you had been returning to Rhode Island. I had heard your name mainly, or first through Devin Samuels, your brother, who is a character and a light. But he mentioned, you and what you've done, and that you're coming back to Rhode Island, and it was exciting to like meet you and to hear your story and to see how intentional you were about being here with Collide Capital and your vision and goals for the VC world, and particularly for founders of color and women. And so I just was hoping to one day be able to sit down with you and chop it up in an elevated way to really just, peek into that mind there, you know what I mean, and get that story. And
let's chop it up.
let's chop it up.
Let's do it.
We're here on the Rhode Less Traveled, which is about folk who have had a significant experience in Rhode Island, whether you're anchored here, whether you started here, whether your journey started elsewhere and came here. But nonetheless, Rhode Island was a big part of it. So you're Aaron Samuels, managing partner at Collide Capital, founder of Blavity, the largest Black media platform in the world, and founder of Afrotech, the largest Black tech conference in the world. Which last year, everyone's trying to snap back from the pandemic, you were able to bring 25,000 people.
25,000.
25,000 people together, Black, and all folks who are into the Black tech world together.
Black adjacent allies.
Yes.
Yeah.
How did you get there? Let's, really, what's your story? Where does it begin?
Big question.
Yeah.
But for all intents and purposes, it begins here.
Yeah.
It begins right here in Rhode Island.
Yeah.
I grew up here. Both my parents are clinical psychologists.
Yes.
My mom has had a private practice for pretty much her entire career. My dad primarily worked with college students, helping run the counseling centers at Brown, URI, and RISD over the course of his career.
Yep.
So I kind of grew up on Brown's campus, and was like always a part of the Rhode Island ecosystem.
Yeah.
I'm Black and Jewish.
Yeah.
And so for me, being part of community and being part of communities was always very, very important in my life. Kind of being part of Black community spaces, being part of Jewish community spaces, being part of artistic community spaces.
Right.
And one of the beautiful things, as you know, about Rhode Island is all of these communities are intertwined, interlocked, and oftentimes in walking distance from one another.
Yes,
right? So
yes.
it was a great place to be part of a mixed race,
Right.
mixed faith family.
Right.
Because I oftentimes felt that I had access to lots of different cultural touch points that were around me and surrounding me.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's 1 degree of separation in Rhode Island, which, really makes, anyone be able to, find community in this kind of place a little easier than a lot of other places. But so you're growing up in this household with a African-American Protestant father and a white Jewish mother, and it's you and your brother. So one, have you reached out to Kenya Barris to do a show? Because Jewish could really fit into there, but really, so how did that environment and that family kind of shape your perspective going out into the world and figuring out who you wanted to be?
Yeah, well, if you know Kenya, feel free to connect us.
Okay.
I wouldn't hate that. And definitely, many points in my childhood felt like a weird comedy.
I bet.
We had had all sorts of wild experiences.
Yeah.
I remember my dad's side of the family showed up to my bar mitzvah. And my aunt, my cousin, they all showed up wearing West African dashikis.
Yeah.
This is probably more black people than my synagogue had ever seen at the same time.
Wow.
So we had my whole dad's family wearing dashikis. My mom's family showed up wearing suits and talit.
Yeah.
And I'm just up on stage, looking at my family, looking at the community. And so there were definitely some fun moments. There were some hard moments too.
Of course.
Of
course.
There was definitely, look, it's not a secret that we live in a world that is sometimes very anti-black, and also sometimes very anti-Jewish.
Right.
And these things also exist. Yeah. So while there's community and love, you also learn about danger in a different way as a child, and the different ways that danger can manifest, whether explicitly or some of the more insidious parts of racism, which is when you don't know if it's happening or not. It makes you wonder. It makes you, why didn't I get this opportunity? Why is this person being cruel to me? Is it because they don't like me, or is it or do they not like me because of blank? And so learning how to navigate that in many ways simultaneously with these two different cultures gave me I think a lens for how I saw the world, and ultimately. Very early on in my childhood made me want to engage in projects that involved empowerment for marginalized communities.
Absolutely. I mean, that's such a powerful story, and obviously I can resonate a bit, as a West African, kind of growing up and navigating, this question of like, what's happening? Why am I going on to these communities or into these places and being treated in this particular way? And as a young person, trying to wrestle with what am I doing? What is it about how I look?
What's happening right now?
What's happening?
Why is this happening? And where'd you grow up again?
So I grew up in Boston.
In the Boston area.
In Boston area, yes.
That's right. So Boston is not known for being the friendliest towards black people.
It's got an interesting history. But it's not surprising that you had these experiences as you're growing up, and then finding a way to reckon with that and also express that. I understand that poetry came, and you are now, in addition to who you are established as in the professional world, and not to say that poetry isn't, but you're also a very established poet, and have really built a reputation and almost a parallel career in the world of poetry. And I want to get to what that has become for you, but I really want to understand the root. How did that kind of come to be? I heard the story of the Shakespeare breaking meter, and you kind of beginning your journey in poetry almost disruptively. And that, I think that's an interesting parallel throughout your this idea of disrupting. That's how it's supposed to be? All right, I don't know. Let me see if I can
funny.
do it.
It's I rarely actually tell that story, but you're right. That is one of the places that it started. That was I'd been writing before that, but the story you're referencing, it was my freshman year of high school.
Okay.
And it was the poetry section of the curriculum.
Yeah.
So we had to write in meter. Right? We were learning about writing in meter, and I wrote this poem in meter. It was like 5-6 stanzas, something like that, and I broke meter in the final stanza to add what I didn't have the language at the time, but it's called a volta, right? It's basically like a shift, an intentional shift that you do in the kind of penultimate moment of a poem in order to bring some type of conclusion or some type of tonal shift into the mix.
Okay.
So I added that.
Yeah.
And I remember the teacher marked me down. Like,
wow.
it was basically like a great poem, but took points off
wow.
for breaking meter.
Wow.
Because said, oh, it was almost perfect, but you broke meter. And I was furious.
Yeah, understandably.
I did this thing that was really good.
Yeah.
I learned more things about poetry, and I made art. And and I remember he took points off, and I was like, I was angry.
Yeah.
So how did I enact my revenge? I started competing in slam poetry.
Yeah, someone's gonna
I said, all right,
validate this.
I'm gonna read this poem to as many people as possible. I'm gonna, and I was very much encouraged by my parents to do so.
Yeah.
You know, both my mom and my dad said, you know, forget about that teacher. Right. Like, here are 3 open mics that you can go to, read the poems there, like start getting into it. Right. And then I'd also went to a summer program where I met a good friend of mine. We wrote a group poem at that summer program. This is my friend Nate Marshall, who now has gone on to become one of the most acclaimed poets in the United States. Wow. We formed an art collective together. Yeah. And he, you know, encouraged me along with my parents and some of my friends to really start getting involved in the local community here, which was based out of a place called AS 220. Yes. Which is a kind of local legend spot, you know, huge center of arts and culture in Rhode Island, and it's also where the Providence Youth Poetry Slam movement was headquartered out of. Yeah. I found a community of young writers. Yeah. And you know, it's amazing to meet people these days. I'm in my 30s, meet people who identify as a writer, as a poet. But to be 14, 15 years old and meet a bunch of other 14 and 15-year-olds who said, I'm a poet, I'm a writer. Right. It was wild, and it in many ways encouraged me to claim that identity for myself. Yeah. When you meet a 14-year-old who looks you in the eye and says, I'm a writer, it gives you the strength to say, I too am a writer. I can be, you're a writer, I can be a writer, I can be a writer too. And the team was incredible. Yeah. You know, my first year on the team, we ended up making it to finals at the National Youth Poetry Slam competition, which is in New York. Finals were at the Apollo Theater. Wow. Did a group poem that I had kind of been one of the writers for at the Apollo. Yeah. Rosario Dawson's in the crowd. Dave Chappelle's in the crowd.
At 14.
At age, maybe I was 15 at that point, about 14, 15.
Wow. That's incredible.
And we got a standing ovation. Yeah. And it changed my life. You know, I'd never seen a room like that, felt energy like that, all because of people that were telling honest stories about their own lived experience. Yeah. It's one of the things that really solidified the power of storytelling. Right. And look, there's lots of different ways that power manifests in the world. There's power through money, there's power through generations, there's power through violence. Yeah. But I realized that there was also power in narrative. Right. And I think especially for people that have been deprived other access points into power, I realized that there was power here. Absolutely. And it started me on a journey with poetry, but then also with Blavity, and in many ways also with me as an investor, looking for ways that people who have been declined access to some nexuses of power, we can still create our own. Yeah. And that starts in many ways with the narrative, with the storytelling.
You know, and that's so interesting that you know, articulate that, you know, focal point you have of storytelling, because I think it's very evident in your trajectory, right? I think even looking at your professional and personal, the poetry and the, venture capitalist world. I think in both, there's a clear interest in getting stories told.
Absolutely.
And so with Collide Capital, you're really addressing the reality that 1.3% of all VC funds are only 1.3% of funds are going to Black founders, and only is it 2.3 or 2.8 going towards women?
It's even less. I think these numbers change on a yearly basis, but I think it's 2.7. That's Black and Latin combined.
Wow.
And it's less than 1% women.
Yeah.
Historically.
Yeah.
And those numbers fluctuate between 1 and 3%.
But it's
either
all
way, it's like it's abysmal.
pretty minimal.
That's the point. It's all of these numbers for Black,
Yes.
for Latin, and for female founders.
Yeah.
Just not getting access to capital.
And in what you're able to do, or what you're focusing on doing with Collide Capital, you're empowering these perspectives to engage in a industry and in a way that allows these stories to be told, allows these ventures, allows these projects, allows this impact to come to a community that, their narrative is still kind of being written. Do you see your engagement with Collide Capital and your intention as because you're not a social impact you're not an impact investing. So how do you wrestle with and navigate the social responsibility, if you even see it as a responsibility, piece of the work that you do?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely a responsibility.
Right.
The reason that I don't identify as an impact investor is not because I don't care about impact. It's actually because I think that the word impact investing has outlived its usefulness.
Yeah.
I think it was created in a time, it was about a couple decades ago now, where there was a movement to move capital to be invested in sectors of the economy that were designed to do good.
Yeah.
And that, in many ways corresponded with the, ESG movement, and we saw more investment into climate and more investment into governance and reporting standards. And I don't want to say that it didn't move the needle.
Yeah.
I think it did.
Right.
I think, a lot of good has come out of the impact investing movement.
Of course.
But one of the things that did not change was the amount of capital that went to Black, Latin, and female founders. And so in many ways, the thing that I care about, I do not believe that the impact investment movement has succeeded at. And therefore, I think perhaps there's a different way that we can approach seeing that particular type of impact. And I think the best way to do that is to say, I'm just trying to create the best venture capital fund possible. I'm trying to invest in founders that are solving problems for the next generation. And I believe that historically, most of the founders that received capital, like in an overwhelming sense, were straight, white men who went to Harvard or Stanford. That is where the majority of venture capital funds have gone, and the majority of venture capitalists come from that pedigree. I do not believe that small microcosm of humanity is the best microcosm that's equipped to solve problems for the rest of the world. Now, do I think a straight white man from Harvard or Stanford can occasionally create something of value? Yes, sure. Of course, it can happen. It can happen. But I also think that there is an entire rest of world of incredible founders and entrepreneurs that are solving the real problems that the rest of the world is experiencing. And I think we need to see more capital being deployed to the rest of the world. Now, I don't want to call that impact. I think it's more important than that. I think it's pragmatic. I think it's necessary. I think that if we are serious about investing in the next generation of great founders, then any venture capitalist that is designed to make money should be looking in a wider section of the market. So I believe that I'm doing my fiduciary responsibility to invest with a diverse lens.
I really respect that perspective, and one of the events we met at, I think later we connected with Nick, was a a conversation on Black philanthropy or
That's
philanthropy
right.
in the
That's
Black
right, yeah.
community. And you had a perspective that was, I think really novel, and I really, respected it. As someone who has navigated my relationship with capitalism, right, and understand that there's nuance and the complexity involved in what will work, right, for the liberation of all peoples, or really just making things better for everyone. You had a stance on, hey, listen, like a lot of people coming into philanthropy aren't coming with the goal of really allowing folk to really build their own, right? It's this kind of model that needs itself to keep going.
Exactly. The premise of charity maintains the class divide.
Exactly. And so I think that you probably have a very interesting perspective on capitalism, right, as a tool for people of color, for marginalized folk, that maybe has nuance in terms of like this question of, can capitalism save? So I guess to make it a answerable question is,
what is capitalism?
How do you wrestle with that tension, or do you get that pushback at all? Right, there's a lot of folks that say that, hey, Black capitalism is only going to recreate a lot of the existing system of oppression, but just by Black hands. And I'm sure, and I know, and I have an MBA, and I'm navigating this well. I have a job too, so that balance is complicated. So I acknowledge that. But how do you kind of maybe just see that in your day to day? Like, is that something that you navigate with Collide Capital? Is that a question that comes up at Afrotech, or is that a piece of your journey as well?
Sure. I'm happy to philosophize about
Yeah.
I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
I've got a hunch.
Yeah.
But the reality is, we're not gonna see the kind of manifestation of this hunch in my lifetime, most likely. So we're gonna try our best here. Yeah. But let me say a couple things. One about capitalism, and then two about kind of the intersection of Blackness and capitalism, I guess. So one, I think capitalism is a tool.
Yeah.
I think, with many tools, it can be used. It can be used for good. It can be used for evil. I also don't think that we live in a capitalist society right now.
Okay.
I think we live in something that is like a weird perversion of capitalism. I think it's more like Foursquare. Have you ever played the game Foursquare as a kid?
You mean the one with the ball?
The one with the ball.
Oh, first of all, I know to play that as a kid and adult, and I'm amazing.
You know what I'm talking about,
Yes,
right?
I do. Yes, I do. Yeah.
So some people, the way they play Foursquare is you play the game, and you're in the different squares, and then you get to the king square where you serve.
Yeah.
Right? And oftentimes when you get to that king square, then you can make up a new rule.
Oh, yeah, I don't play with people who play like that.
Yeah, so that's how we used to play when I was in elementary school, right? So then as the game progresses, the rules can get more and more advanced. The person in King Square sets the rules.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, okay.
I think that's what we do right now in capitalism.
Okay.
Right? So even if at some point in time, which I doubt, but even if, let's assume at some point in time we all started on the same starting line.
Right.
The way that generational wealth works, the way that redlining works, the way that laws have worked, the way that imperialism and colonial society has worked.
Right.
We are no longer creating a world that has fair competition.
Right.
And so if it's not fair competition, then it's not truly capitalism.
Right.
If some people are starting off with literally like hundreds of $millions in trust funds, and other people are starting off with poor school systems, with struggling to make ends meet, in different income brackets that don't allow you to have access to academic resources.
Absolutely.
It's not a fair fight. Right? It's not a fair competition.
Absolutely.
And so then it's not really capitalism.
Yeah.
Right? Like capitalism is predicated on a premise of fair market competition.
Right.
It's not fair. And the reason that is because then the people who made it to the King Square, the people that made it to the top,
have created new rules.
Has then created new rules. And then it makes it impossible for anybody to catch up.
Yeah.
And that's not capitalism.
Yeah.
It's more, it looks more like an oligopoly.
Right.
Or an oligarchy. Right. And so that doesn't really work. And there's all sorts of studies that have been said that like oligopolies, oligarchies are some of the kind of worst structures for a productive, humane society. Right? So let me just say right off the bat, because I think oftentimes when we talk about capitalism, we assume that we're living in capitalism. And I don't actually think we are. I think we're living in something weird that's not actually capitalism at all.
And I'm not trying to defend capitalism,
Right.
but I do want to acknowledge that if we're talking about it, let's talk about it in its pure form, which is fair competition.
Yeah.
Because I'm also a competitor.
Right.
And I want to believe that, okay, if you give me exactly the same resources as somebody else, then I'm down to hustle.
And I definitely resonate with that, analysis as well, because, for me, my work has been on understanding the roots of where we've come from as a society, and folks of color and marginalized communities, and markets have existed before the invention of capitalism as we know it, right? And so that competitive, hey, I'm gonna make something and go and sell it, that has always been a part of society, indigenous societies, various cultures, right? And so I think your analysis of where we are right now, and just this question of how do we get to a version of an exchange that is without a lot of the things that create the significant problems that we have today, I think is an important question. But one thing you also mentioned was this intersection, and I couldn't help but think of your identity intersection, right? And being Black and Jewish. W.B. Du Bois has this idea of double consciousness, right? Yeah. Where like being Black and living in America and having to navigate those two sides. So you have a triple consciousness of sorts with navigating being Jewish, Black, and being in America.
I'm not 100% sure it works that way, but I like that.
But if it does work that way, make sure you at me on Twitter and make sure I get my proper credits. But yeah, WB the boy. But yeah, if you could talk a bit about what it's like navigating those three, I want to say hats, fitteds, or yarmulkes. Those. How do you kind of wear those in the different?
No, I appreciate that, and I oftentimes think a lot about how being part of a racialized group of people changes your access points to capitalism or to society. Yeah. In many ways, Jewish oppression is very real, but looks very different than Black oppression.
Right.
And in the ways that many Jews who have white skin or light skin have been able to assimilate, that looks a lot different than many Black people who do not.
Right.
And don't get me wrong, there are plenty of Black Jews and plenty of Jews that have dark skin, and there's plenty of Black people that have light skin. But if you look at the numbers on average, there's more Jews that have access to white skin, there's more Black people that don't, and that has changed the way that people have been able to access assimilation into white culture that has then changed a bit of class stratification in this country. And I think that different groups have responded in different ways. As a Black person, I want to see us pool our resources. I want to see us empower one another. As a Jewish person, I also want to see that. I think that the Jewish community has a lot of structural things in place right now to think about pooling resources and supporting ourselves. Which, when the majority of your global population has been wiped out over the past couple hundred years, it can force that to take place. Black oppression has looked different. Right. It has looked like chattel slavery, right? It has looked like economic imprisonment. It is an extraction of labor. A lot of Jewish oppression has looked like just straight up murder and genocide. I don't want to compare these two things. I think that they are both bad in an incommensurable way. But as a product of both of these communities, I oftentimes think about, okay, what happens now, right? What is our charge for the next generation? What can we do? Right. And I am usually a fan of models that involve investing in our own communities. What does it mean to support one another? What does it mean for us to invest in Black-owned businesses? What does it mean for us to reinvest in our own community centers? And I think that's one of the ways that we can make, let's not say capitalism, but let's say some of the tools of capitalism work for us. Right. And in many ways that is some of the motivation behind why I wanted to create a venture capital fund, is to say, can I find a way with a great team of people to deploy capital and resources into founders and entrepreneurs that are literally creating businesses designed to benefit our own communities. And if we can deploy that capital perhaps there's also other venture capitalists that also can deploy capital that way too.
Right.
But if we can move the needle, if we can change it from 1% of black founders getting funding to or 1% of venture capital funding going to black people,
Right.
can we make that at least at index with the United States?
Yeah.
Can we get 10% of the
Right.
capital going to black people?
Right.
Can we get 30% going to Latin?
Right.
Can we get 50% of venture capital going to women? Imagine the different types of businesses
Yeah.
that would be accelerating. Imagine what could be possible
Absolutely.
if we actually just balanced the capital
Yeah.
to being indexed with the population.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that like you speaking to these issues in the way that you're speaking of them, I mean, one can consider it political in a way, and that's not typically common, at least, again.
Well,
MBA friends, I have people in the VC world, and I wonder if having that difficult conversation and saying that thing that maybe isn't the most palatable, but obviously your training has allowed you to be able to deliver things in a palatable way, or at least a way that makes you listen and hear. I'm assuming a lot of that took root at home, right? Having difficult conversations. When you navigate this triple consciousness in your own body, you actually had to navigate that at home with your parents, right? How did kind of having difficult conversations play a role in your upbringing, and how do you feel like do you feel like it's allowed you to really make the points that you're making today?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when Du Bois was talking about double consciousness, one of the things that he talked about was how black Americans were always in a position where they had to look at themselves through the eyes of others, or through the lens of others. Right. And I think about that a lot in terms of the household that I grew up in.
Yeah.
Both being black and Jewish, having clinical psychologist parents, there was a lot of work with I call it forced empathy, almost, right? Sometimes we ask ourselves when we train empathy, right? When we're learning about empathy, when we're becoming educators or teachers or leaders, leadership seminars. Oftentimes, a big part of the training is okay. Well, think about, how do you see yourself in somebody else's shoes? How do you imagine you're being perceived by other people? What does that look like?
Right.
I think when you're a person of color in this country, you don't have a choice. It's forced empathy, right? You have to consider how you're going to be perceived by the eyes of others, because there's real risk associated with not having that. And that I think, I mean, that's not the only part of double consciousness that Du Bois talks about, but that was always one of the parts that really interested me, right? This forced empathy, because there's some clear benefits of that too. Right? It means that you grow up at an earlier age, asking yourself, okay, what is this other person's perspective of me? You're able to see different lenses. And I would just say that being black and Jewish just added on more lenses, right? So I've had to live in different types of rooms. And I think that's also made me a more helpful ally to other causes as well. Because with that forced empathy, I think that it can translate.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I see that in the way that you bring community together, the rooms that you're in. I mean, you're on the Forbes list. Well,
the under 30 list.
All right, but
not the big list.
Sorry, that hasn't been released yet. But yeah,
one day maybe.
One day. But you're Forbes 30 under 30 2016 media list, and you've with Blavity, with Afrotech, you're TED Talk speaker, you're an established poet. You are in Dark Noise with folks like Jamila Wood, Franny Choi, Fatima Ashgar. Shout out to Brown. We went to school together.
Got some Providence representation.
You're in a lot of different spaces, and with different kind of associations and networks kind of around you, and you kind of have to represent in some ways. I'm sure, obviously, different identities, but also yourself in these different spaces. And I'm just kind of curious as to this is also just from a perspective, selfishly, how do you maintain humility? How do you maintain a strong sense of self as you're kind of in all of these spaces that are asking different things of you and setting different kind of expectations? Yeah,
I mean, I think that the kind of the bigger the room that you're in, the more you realize how little you are. I was talking to Asia about this before the shoot, just about New York and how in New York there's always somebody doing it bigger than you. Let me tell you a story. So it's 2011, right? I was like 6 months, 8 months out of undergrad. It was New Year's, from 2011 to 2012 in New York City. And me and my friends were all living in Hell's Kitchen, Lower Hell's Kitchen at the time. And we were in this kind of new unit. We had access to a huge rooftop.
Okay.
So we said we're just gonna. So we threw this huge New Year's party.
Okay.
Right, and we invited just like any black and brown person who was working on Wall Street that we knew. I had friends come up from Rhode Island who I'd grown up with. I had friends from undergrad. We had all these all the kind of black hustlers who had like made it into New York Wall Street, and we threw this party. There was probably 200, 300 people there. It was way too many people. We got in a lot of trouble, but there was this one moment, right, where we found ourselves when we were counting down, 10, 9, 8, and I ended up I felt like the crowd moved me. Like I didn't even know how I got there, but I ended up just standing on a chair on my rooftop holding a bottle of champagne. And I looked around and it was like my 8 best friends all suddenly all had their own bottles all in the chairs too. And we ended up popping these bottles, Happy New Year's. And we felt that we were on top of the world. I was 22 years old. I was, damn near giving all my money to rent. Hardly had anything left over. Didn't know what I was doing in the world. But we thought we had made it. Years later, right? A decade later, I'm in New York City. I'm visiting a friend of mine who's a mentor of mine. Another black and Jewish individual, actually, but he's a couple decades on me, and he was a big kind of chief diversity officer at this agency, and he invites me over to his crib. And so it turns out he lives in kind of the similar neighborhood. So I'm like, okay, cool, I'm going back to Hell's Kitchen. So we go over to his crib to kind of have drinks and catch up, and he lives on the 50th floor. Right. So we go up there, and I go into his crib and I realize I can see the rooftop where I'd had that New Year's party decades long ago. And I walked out onto his roof and we peered over, and that rooftop that I had that New Year's experience at was so far below us that you could barely see it. The people looked like little ants. And I realized that when I was popping bottles in 2011, thinking I was king of the world, there were people up on the 50th floor who didn't even notice us because of how far beneath us they were. And exactly, it was one of these weird moments. And that I realized that New York can be humbling in that way. Because I said all this to my friend, right? And he goes, it's even crazier? And I said, what? And he said, go look at that building over there. And then he points up to this other building a few blocks away that was even taller, that was looking down at us. Right? And I think that in many ways, for me, that's just a metaphor for humility, right? Is that if I don't make it to that job and end up popping bottles, I'm not even aware that there's that next building. I'm not even aware that there's that next building. And I think that that kind of humility works that way. My dad used to always say to me growing up, if you're the smartest person in the room, then you're in the wrong room. And I think that there can sometimes be a tendency to want to be a big fish in a small pond, but that's the way that you stop growing. And my goal is to continue to grow. And in order to do that, I need to stay remembering that there are always people who are smarter. There are always people who are better. There are always people who are faster. And my goal is to not be the smartest person in this room. My goal is to continue hustling so that I can continue to expand and grow.
Wow. Well, I'm sorry you're in this room. 'Cause you know what I'm saying?
This is a beautiful room. This is a beautiful room.
I'm kidding.
This is still
our much smarter.
We got National Geographic documentaries that have been shot by this team. This is a fantastic room to be in.
Absolutely. And so 2 things there. One, clearly New York should update the slogan from if you make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. If you make it in New York, you still ain't shit. But
that is the New York's unofficial slogan.
But to the and I know we got to wrap up soon. To the being a big fish in a small pond, you're back in Rhode Island, after or with your reputation, everything that comes with being the founder of Blavity, Afrotech, and now Collide Capital, and so you are a shark, considered a kind one, maybe a whale, here. And now you have to kind of reintegrate a bit into this community. So what does it look like having the background that you have, reconnecting at home? Like where are you? Who are you reconnecting with? Like what does Aaron back after, leaving in high school as young poet Aaron and coming back with all the accolades you have on you now?
Well, I think the first thing that I realized is if I was coming back after all of the lived experience that I've had, how many other people were also doing the same thing, right? And one of the beautiful things that I've witnessed over the past few years is all of the talent that I've seen as like a magnet kind of gravitating towards Rhode Island. When I came back during COVID, I saw the CIC, I saw Social Enterprise Greenhouse, I saw Mass Challenge, I saw RI Hub. I met with folks across the board. I met with Walter Callender and saw the work that he was doing building Black business ecosystems and communities. I see the work that the Stay Silent crew is doing in terms of cultivating communities of joy. There are people here that are building, and the people that are building are diverse and come from different walks of life. And we have communities here of incredible talent across the board. Like we were talking earlier. One of my favorite things about Rhode Island is that Black just means so many different things here. In Rhode Island, Black means Cape Verdean, right? Black means West African, Black means Dominican, Black means Puerto Rican, right? Like Black means mixed, right? Like there's like there's a lot of different versions of even what that means here, and that's true for many different communities here as well. There's an incredible Southeast Asian population in Rhode Island. There's a South Asian population, in Rhode Island. There's all sorts of, and of course you got Irish, you got Italians, right? You see this blend, this melting pot. And a lot of these folks who I grew up with, went to college, built things, built organizations, now are here. And now are building community, and there's a call to bring these resources together. So when I see that, I just want to be part of it. I want to be part of that wave. And I'm hoping that as a former founder, I can give advice, can share my journey. As an investor, maybe I can capitalize some of these initiatives if they make sense with our business model. And even more important, though, I want to be part of the conversation.
Awesome. And I think Rhode Island is lucky to have you return and to bring this energy and this interest in engaging across these communities. I think it's exciting. Curious as to, again, like I connected with you or got to know you mainly through your brother. Devin Samuels, who is a force of his own to be
He's a force.
Reckoned with, and someone who's been doing deep community work between Rhode Island. I know he was in Detroit for a little bit, and engaging at the intersection of community, art, just innovation, design, and really has been, also involved. So I'm curious as to like what your interests are, also like working with your brother and kind of taking this place by, storm. Y'all are like the, Chloe and Halle, but Jewish, and in a whole different space of work. I was trying to think of a duo. That duo stood out to me. I like that duo, man.
I'm not mad at that. I'm not mad at that at all. I'm like, which one of us is the Little Mermaid? But I'm not mad at it at all. I love my brother. I mean, my brother, we grew up in the same house. We grew up with the same values. But in many ways, our career paths what I thought they did was I thought they kind of diverged, and in many ways they're circling back onto themselves. My brother also is a poet, and then really went deep down the educator route. Spent years as a youth poetry educator, working in Detroit school systems. He's co-director of Providence Poetry Slam right now. The work that he's done, with the state of Rhode Island, working with Design RI, cultivating ecosystems of makers and creators. lots of overlaps with the work that I do as a venture capitalist. I think at our core, me and my brother are doing the same thing, which is we are trying to find people when they're at or near the genesis of their creative ideas and asking them, what can I do to help? What can I do to help take this to the next level? There's a lot of things that one can do to help. It can be money, it can be advice, it can be resources, it can be networks, it can be different types of access, it can be different types of community support. So we sometimes use a little bit of a different tool set in order to help catalyze these businesses. But ultimately we're doing the same thing, which is we're trying to help creative people thrive and keep creating.
Absolutely.
And today, you know, my brother just got a new job. He's working at Harvard.
Oh wow! So he got the
Harvard grade. So my brother worked. So he's got a job working with the Kennedy School and basically working with people across multiple different Harvard graduate schools who are working on social justice innovation projects. And my brother's job is to help steer them through a year-long curriculum to help catalyze their projects. So in many ways, you know, me and my brother, we're both poets. We're both Black and Jewish. But right now, we're both trying to be catalysts for creative initiatives.
That's huge. That's huge. Well, I'm excited for you both, and I'm excited for what you're going to bring to Rhode Island. One, I wanted to, I know, again, I keep saying we're wrapping up, and we are. But I wanted to commend you.
You got my book.
I got your book. Yarmulkes and Fitted Caps, which it's been a great read and a great way to get to know you, but also just to, you know, see the different conversations you've been having. This book came out or you published 2013, right?
2013, yeah.
And so, you know, you were a relatively recent college grad.
Yeah, I guess I graduated in 2011.
2011. And so 2 years later, you're publishing, you know, a book that you know, as you said, you worked on this your whole life, right? And, you know, so many of the stories kind of stood out to me. So many of the things that you spoke about, I read and watched your TED Talk presentation of performance of Grandma, and that was, you know, an amazing story about, you know, watching and supporting and understanding and holding on to the memory of your grandma. And I still see the consistent theme of the importance of storytelling and connected storytelling is listening to stories. And making sure you have those perspectives around you at all times, right? That consistent growth process is continually listening and continually hearing what's happening from, you know, other perspectives. And I'm just so excited for where you're gonna go, where you are, and whom else you're bringing with you. Again, hoping to be a part of that. Kenya Barris will talk. But I wanted to end with a series of questions. These questions are quick and they're tough because you can't really. You just have to choose one. All right.
Forced binaries. My favorite thing.
Binaries. Some of them are Rhode Island based. Some of them are non-Rhode Island based that you have a perspective on. Dell's Lemonade or Mr. Lemon?
Dell's Lemonade.
Okay. Yeah. No. Very clear.
No question.
Okay.
At all.
Absolutely. Nice Slice or Antonio's?
Nice Slice, please.
Okay. All
nice
right.
Slice.
You know, I'm agreeing. I'm in agreement.
Nice
Fully.
Slice.
Come on.
And I grew up when the Nice Slice and Antonio's were across from each other on Bay Street.
Yeah.
This
When it had a real
rivalry.
question,
Now Nice Slice is on the West End. It's a different situation.
I will say, when Antonio's had the dollar cheese piece, the dollar cheese pizza as a undergrad, when you're broke, it's compelling. So Antonio's did have the leg up on the if you're broke and you just need a slice.
Yeah.
But
I get that logic. It's the wrong answer, but I do get that logic.
You get it. Okay. Coffee, milk. If you only keep one. You only keep one. You only keep one.
Rhode Island question already.
Coffee, milk, or pizza strips?
Oh, that's funny.
One stays.
Oh, probably pizza strips.
Pizza strips?
Probably pizza strips.
I'm with you. You know, I want coffee or I want milk. I don't tend to want them both.
But Rhode Island is one of the only school systems in the country that serves coffee milk in elementary school.
I did not
Public
know
elementary
that.
schools, they serve coffee milk. So you grew up here in third grade, you're drinking coffee milk with your public school lunch.
We should talk about that.
It's a whole thing.
Okay.
These are great questions.
Thank you. Came up with something. The Dominican Festival or the Cape Verdean Festival?
Oh, come on. I can't.
I know.
That's a trap question.
You get one. You get one. We don't have to choose.
Okay, cool.
You get one.
For the record, I'm not answering this question.
No. You know what? I'm going to let you. I don't want you to have those beef in the streets. You got a lot of communities got to bring together.
That's a trap.
We're going to keep his community ties.
That's a trap.
Tied. All right. We're going to leave that one alone. All right. The last four. Buddy Cianci or Arnold Schwarzenegger? He's from Cali. I got it. Buddy Cianci or Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Oh man, are you wearing a wire?
All you have to do is pick one. You do not have to incriminate yourself beyond a yes or one or the other answer.
I'll say that I'll choose Rhode Island all day.
Okay, that's a great answer. Viola Davis or Pauly D?
Viola Davis, obviously.
Just have to. We're working on our pool. We're working on our pool here. Two more. Rhode Island food scene or the LA food scene?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Well, so I mean, it's just completely different.
Yeah,
different
yes.
types of cuisine.
Yeah, yeah,
You
absolutely.
know, you know, Rhode Island, the seafood is unmatched. I
Yeah.
mean, you know, it's incredible food.
Can't get a better lobster
you know,
roll anywhere.
Exactly. The Dominican food here is incredible.
Yeah.
You know, in LA, I think that there's just a broader diversity of like different types of food.
Yeah.
Both great.
Yeah.
Honestly, they're a match in my mind.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. A match. We're gonna have to work on that this summer too, because I'm gonna edge you over to the Rhode Island, because you gotta come back here. There's some new things here.
Like, don't get me wrong. Like I love the Rhode Island food scene.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
incredible. It's just
yeah.
LA is a world-class food
all
city.
right,
I mean,
all right.
it's a hard rival.
This is
they're
fair.
both
This is fair.
fantastic.
We don't got enough Michelin stars. We're working on that. All right, last one. LA beaches or Rhode Island beaches? We talked about a little bit before.
Okay, it depends. Are we talking in June or are we talking in December?
That's true. You have to factor in. We have a limited window.
Give me
in the window where they're both available to utilize in the summer.
Got it.
If
So
you could
during
choose
like
anywhere.
the 6 weeks.
Yeah, you're in the middle of the United States, and you have a week where everything is just like, yo, go where you want.
So I'm in Chicago.
Yeah, you're in
June.
Chicago.
It's June.
Yes.
Then I'm going to Rhode Island.
Come to Rhode
It's the
Island.
ocean
All right,
state.
all right. As long as we get Rhode Island there. Aaron, brother, thank you so much for the conversation. This is definitely dope, and this is a new venture with the Rhode Less Traveled, but you've really been just a critical part of starting this journey, and I don't doubt we're gonna go great places because we started here. So I'm just grateful, man.
Thank you. Look, it's been an honor. I appreciate you taking the time to do this, and I'm excited to see where the series goes.
Yeah, so I see where you go with Clyde Capital and everything. So thank you for being here, and yeah, looking forward to just staying engaged, brother.